Hello and welcome to this episode of CounselTrends. I am Dr. Shawnee Anderson with my lovely partner, Dr. Mercy Connors. And we actually have a very special article to talk about today. That was a topic that was requested by one of our members and individual who watches CounselTrends. And so because of that, we are going to be dedicating this episode, oh my gosh, and I'm going to cry. Why am I going to cry? To her cat, Gideon, who passed away a few months ago. And this member had asked us if we would do a counsel trend on losing a pet. So for anybody, I'm getting tearful again, for anybody who, like me, has lost a pet or maybe struggling, like dear Mercy is, with a sick pet, just be aware that this may be very emotional for you. So you may want to pause if this becomes too much to watch. But we did find an article. Yep. Even just the title of the journal is the Journal of Death and Dying. And the article is entitled The Impact of Continuing Bonds Between Pet Owners and Their Pets Following the Death of Their Pet, a Systematic Narrative Synthesis. And I think we're both going to be crying a little bit here.
I think this is one of the things that is the most difficult that people go through, because pets are that explanation of unconditional love.
Absolutely.
And I think my husband, before we were married, he had really explained God's love to me using my dog Amos.
Oh, now you're going to make me cry more.
But I do think that was such an important thing for me. And that's why Amos, my dog, means so much to me, because he really broke through like that understanding.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. I understood God in a very different way, in a very tangible way, that God loves me no matter what, no matter if I'm having a terrible day, no matter if I yell at him, no matter if I do anything, he still loves me. And that's what Amos did for me. So, and my sweet boy is 11 years old and it has heart disease. And so this one's a hard one.
This is going to be a hard one on us. And we lost our dog, my son's dog, when we moved to Virginia. And I think we've all experienced the loss of a dear, dear pet. And so the article is really kind of a systematic analysis looking at a number of studies and looking at the concept of attachment.
Yes.
And how not only do we get attached to people, but we get attached to our pets. And I think you just said it so beautifully, that our pets love us so unconditionally that it is a glimpse of God, and it gives us an idea of what love truly feels like.
Yes. And I love that we explain this. Like, the article is great. I'll say I did not cry as much as I feel like I'm crying now. But one of the things, too, that I wanted to bring up, that when I was working with somebody who was suicidal and they really were struggling in life and they didn't really have anything to hold on to, like any person, I would use their pet for them to hold on to. Because I feel like that was something that they were like, yes, that is something I need to live for. I need to be there for them. You know, how would that affect the pet? So these relationships, I know it sounds funny to somebody who's maybe not a pet owner, but these really are relationships. These pets have personalities.
Yes.
They have likes, they have dislikes, they have moods.
Yes.
And so it is a real relationship. And sometimes they ebb and flow. You know, me and my dog Amos, we were really, really close. Like when, you know, I was living alone and things like that. And then when my husband came into the picture, he got a lot closer to my husband. But that's because he's home all the time. You know, he works from home, so he's with him all the time. But there's still that special bond that we have. And it's funny because we say that at certain times of the day, he's with each one of us. So anytime in the morning times are mine and Amos's cuddle time. He will literally come across my chest and lay his head right here. And I think that that's the beauty of pets, is that they love without abandon. It's an all the time love. And so it makes sense why these things continue after they're gone.
And that's where I think you bring up something a moment ago that I think is so important that they talk about in the paper is really, I think we feel almost embarrassed.
Yes.
Or that society is not going to really understand the pain we experience when we lose a pet. You know, I've lost several pets that were just completely overwhelming and devastating.
Yeah.
And I've had patients who have done the same. And one in particular lost her cat, who had really been a savior when she had been suicidal.
Right.
And the fact that that cat had passed, we had to work on what she called pre-grieving.
Yep.
That she knew the cat, that she was going to have to put the cat down. And so we spent a good month pre-grieving that loss and then walking her through the loss and after the loss and how, and I think what is interesting is I don't know if I've ever met anybody that hasn't said that same thing you did of kind of like, oh my gosh, this feels silly or people aren't going to understand.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that the paper talks about. And one of my hopes of being able to do this video today is that we can dispel that myth that these animals just don't matter to us or that it's not an attachment bond because it very truly is.
Yes. And I think that was interesting at the beginning when they were talking about it, is that oftentimes the participants were talking about their pet in a very, had pet names or called it their baby.
My baby.
And I'm like, yes, that is exactly how I talk to my dog. So we say he's Amos Obadiah, our sweet boy. So he's even got nicknames. I mean, he's got songs. He's got lots of things.
He's family.
He is family.
Well, and he serves, if you look at attachment, there are the 4 F's of attachment that when you have a secure attachment, you feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure.
Yes.
And think of how a pet makes us feel those 4
yes.
F's.
Even when we may not feel those ways with other people.
Right.
A pet can really be that for you. You know, when I lived alone, you know, even though I had my family and I had my future husband, I still didn't have somebody there with me all the time, but he was. Yes. And he did those things very much for me when I had a hard day at work. You know, he was immediately there wanting to be petted. And as we know, when you pet an animal, whether that's a horse or a cat or a dog, like it really does release those endorphins and it does make you feel better. But it's also that connection. It's that you are connected with that pet.
I also think that I know when I was growing up and it was so traumatic and I felt so lost and so alone and I would just sit in my room for hours and just cry. And we had this cat that we named, don't even ask, Zoni. And I'll never forget that I would cry and actually Zoni would look at me and he would come alongside me and look in my eyes. And there was something about that eye-to-eye contact that we know is so important for infants with attachment that would just soothe my soul. And I think so many of our clients, our patients, people we know can experience that and the blessing that is. But when we lose that pet, how difficult it is.
Yes.
And so this study did a literature research on all different types of pets and pet loss. They looked predominantly, most of them turned out to be dogs and cats, but they found that a number of pets that people were grieving ranged from, I was surprised, like horses and rats and
ferrets and birds and guinea pigs. And, you know, it's so funny because I have a dear friend and she has...
She's a deer? Bad joke.
Well, not, you know, she's dear to me, I guess I should say. She has, it's not hamsters.
Gerbil?
Gerbils. Okay. She has gerbils. And those things are, you know, because she, again, lives alone. And, but they are very much a connection to her. And they really mean a lot to her. So, like, when she would come and stay at our house, because she would stay at our house from time to time, she would bring them with her.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, it was so funny because there were certain ones, so they're like, kind of like a pack animal, like they need other
Oh,
animals with.
never knew that.
Yes. And so she liked one of them but didn't like the other
Oh.
one. But it's interesting because I think that too shows a little bit of a difference, that it really is that connection with the pet.
Right.
And because I said this multiple times to other people, that Amos is the first dog that I feel like loved me. I've had other dogs in the past, and I connected with them on a level, but not like this. Very, very different. Like my brother also had a dog when we were growing up, and that was his dog. Oh my goodness, that dog loved him and only him. And when he passed away, he passed away while we were at college.
Oh.
So that was really, really
hard.
tough. But that was the one that, like, that's when I started noticing, oh, this is gonna be
not
tough.
good.
It's gonna be tougher than I thought it was.
Well, and that's really what the article spoke about,
Yep.
is that it really looked at a number of articles and then in the end came up with 3 main themes that we're
Yes.
going to cover that they noticed within each one of these studies that they really seem to exemplify. So the first theme was the intensity of grief
Yeah.
and how that actually got split into 4 different areas.
Yes. So grief as a destabilizing emotion. And this is where it was talking about, because we talk about our pets like as children or babies or our best friend or our companion, or even somebody that loved us the most. I think a lot of people see that as
Right.
how their pet is. That really created a lot of emotional turmoil. There was a numbness, and then it can even move into clinical depression and
Correct.
even trauma responses, which that
Exactly.
made so much sense. Like however the pet passed away would produce those type of symptoms, because if it was a traumatic death, like say the pet got ran over or something like that,
Right.
something unexpected.
My baby was my little Bengal cat Cashmere, and she wasn't well for a while. And then my husband and I had gone out of town, and you could tell she'd waited until we got back. And then that night, she was sitting in my arms, and it was so traumatic for me because she ended up seizing for like 2 hours. And had I known that she was that close to dying, I would have never wanted her to suffer, and I would have taken her to the vet.
Right.
But we had no idea.
Right.
And that was so traumatic to me,
Yes. Yep.
to actually watch her go through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so painful and
It
so
is.
traumatic.
It is. And sometimes these feelings last a lot longer. Like my parents just had their little baby pass away a little over a year ago. And one of the things that they said is like, my parents are retired, and they literally just sat on the couch and just stared. Like for 3 days, they said.
It's like sitting Shiva.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was really painful for them. But I think it's also, again, it shows you it's like that love. It's that grieving process. It took them 3 days.
And this is normal.
Yes,
And I think
yes.
that's the most important thing that we really wanted
It
to
is.
relay to everybody, that grief is a destabilizing emotion.
It is.
That it's not just bummer,
Yep.
pet died.
Right.
But it really is deep, deep, and it can truly alter you
Yep.
for a substantial period of time.
Yes. And I also think that this is what I love too about this, is that it was talking about the impact of the continuing bond with that pet later on, which this actually made me feel a little bit more safe, with realizing that Amos is not going to stay with us forever. That these bonds do last.
Because he'll still always be with you.
Yep.
And you will always have what he's meant to you. And his love will be with you even long after he's gone.
Isn't that wonderful to think about? Like this is a pet, but that's also what we have with the Lord.
Yes.
And these are things that, I'm going to have to teach my girls, because they're going to see him pass away. Yes. Oh, this is a lot harder than I was going to be.
The bonds can continue, and I think that's something that's very important to understand with the powerful level of grief that we experience, of finding ways that can be tolerable, because it's going to be very painful to
Right.
continue it. So I have a patient who got a picture of her dog's
Yes.
paw print as a tattoo.
Oh,
And so she
sweet.
carries him with her. He's still alive, but is not doing well.
Right.
But there's so many different things. Like I got little Cashmere's paw print in a little, I don't even know what you call it, a little concrete thing. And
Yes.
she's still on my counter, my bedroom dresser, and I see her every day. And I have her picture, and being able to hold on to people even after they're gone, that continued bond can really keep us.
Yes. And it's so interesting because
grief.
you even just said we continue with people because to us, they are very
They
much a family
are,
member. They're very
yes.
personal. And I think, some of the things like, obviously you're seeing us crying like little babies. Like this is...
Don't mock it. See, she just did what we're trying to encourage everybody not to. We're not crying like little babies. We're crying because grief of pets is profound.
Yes.
And we do have attachments to that.
Right. But I also think that allows us to show how deep the bonds really are.
Right.
That these are very important things.
Yes.
And that it's going to look different. Like,
Yes.
so you probably grieved for your pets whenever you had them at
Mm-hmm.
different times in your life differently than you would grieve now.
Right.
And, I've grieved for pets I've had in my life differently than I'm going to grieve for Amos. And my girls are going to grieve for Amos differently than I'm going to grieve for Amos.
And it's important. And one of the things that it showed in this study is the goal is we want to avoid disenfranchised grief.
Yes.
When you have disenfranchised grief, it's when you don't feel like you can really grieve.
Yes.
And that there are blocks to it. And like we've been talking about, of feeling like this is stupid or that other people are going to judge me for having such powerful emotions. And so really allow yourself to grieve.
Oh.
You're pre-grieving
I am
now.
pre-grieving. Me and my husband have had, since he's had his diagnosis, we've had the diagnosis for a little over a month. And it's so funny how we grieve different, there are some weeks that we do okay. And there are some weeks that we do really bad because we can see it progressing.
And that, I think, is just really, really normal.
It is.
It is. And another
is.
theme, and that goes to another theme that they found in the article, were the means of coping and support mechanisms.
I thought this was very interesting.
What part did you think was interesting?
The religious coping. That to me was very interesting.
Why don't you share what you found?
So it was talking about how people will connect with their spirituality or see the pet in a different light as far as like soul, spirit, that type of thing. And I thought that was really interesting because me and my husband have had this conversation that we do believe that Amos is going to be in heaven with us, that God loves animals, and that we see in the descriptions of heaven that there are animals all throughout it. So we really do think that, animals are going to be up there.
Yes.
It's one of our favorite things because we talk about, me and my husband love Chronicles of Narnia, and we're like, Amos is going to get to talk to us. And so, those are the happy things that we get to talk about. But it's very interesting that was actually something that was very helpful because I do think that some people have stated, oh, I don't see that in the Bible. And I'm like, just because the Bible doesn't come out and say things directly does not mean that you can't see evidence of it.
Exactly.
And I'm going to choose that my God loves me unconditionally.
Yes.
Like my sweet Amos does. And if he knows how important Amos is to me, then he's going to make sure Amos is.
I agree. And so you're using your faith and
I
you're
am.
using that to help you with the pre-grieving that you're doing now, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that we're really talking about is the importance of getting that support system. And
Yes.
I even remember when I was a little girl and we lost our first cat. And my father had named him Khufu after the giant Egyptian king. Don't ask me why. And what we did as kids, as I'll never forget, the entire neighborhood kids came over to the house for the little funeral. And we buried him. Mm-hmm. And then my dad built this little concrete pyramid in our backyard. But it was so helpful as a small child.
Yes.
Because we had an opportunity with everyone in the neighborhood who knew Khufu, and we all had that opportunity together to grieve together, to support each other. And nobody said, like, oh, this is stupid.
Yep.
Everybody just really validated that Khufu was king.
Yeah.
And that he, had his pyramid in the afterlife. I don't know. But the support of others is so critical when you're trying to grieve.
Well, and I love the fact that it also talks about the importance of doing things like what you just said, like having a funeral, having a
the
time.
rituals.
Yeah, and those can be similar or dissimilar. It doesn't have to be the same for a human as it does for a pet. But I think that there has to be this statement, like these statements, this showing of love. And one of the ways to show love is to do funerals, to do eulogies, to do things like that. And I think that that's really helpful.
Yes.
The other thing that I thought was very interesting, and I have heard about this, is that a lot of professionals are now moving into this pet loss as a grief thing. Like they actually focus on it in their practices, which totally makes sense.
Totally makes sense, because I think it is so critical.
Well, and I think also because of the disenfranchised grief, a lot of that. Because I do think that a lot of people feel like they shouldn't be this overwhelmed about a pet passing away.
And now we see that is beyond normal.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the things I love that they talk about is kind of the vet's role in this.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting.
And this has happened to me a couple of times, is initially when we've had to put pets down, the vets are there and very, very supportive. But after the fact, they called to check up on us. They wrote us a condolence card that I still have out by our dog Carly, and her, her collar and her picture. And it was just, it really helped to know that somebody outside the family who knew Carly, who knew our cats, but not the way we did.
Yep.
But by them reaching out, it was not expected. And so it really was like this outsider validating that our grief was okay. Really, really helped.
Yeah. And it makes it real, but also then, okay, it's okay for me to grieve this.
It gives permission.
Yes. And I think sometimes we do need that.
Yes.
But I also think that this is where it was interesting how people were talking about the intensity of grief for one pet versus of another. And this is, again, where I feel like that connection, this is where I do believe pets have personalities.
They do.
And you're going to connect with certain pets in a different way than you connect with other pets. And so there's going to be times maybe when you grieve for a pet differently than you grieve for another
pet.
pet.
That's okay too.
Yes,
I mean, I have this cat right now who drives me absolutely insane. He really is so difficult, but I know I'll cry and I'll be devastated when he's gone. But right now I'm like, you're driving me nuts, dude. You sit on my head every night and he's always in the way. But he's not my little Cashmere.
Right.
And he's not like Carly. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And it's okay. I think the other thing that I found very interesting, and I think maybe this is after the third one, so we could talk about it afterwards.
Well, yeah, the third theme that they found was personal growth and how people actually can have growth through the grief. And it reminds me of post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Of that people can go through very traumatic experiences, but actually grow above and beyond and through the grief into something even better.
Yes, and I feel like that is very, very true. And again, this comes back to where layers of religion and spirituality came out here, is that there is much more of an understanding of different things, maybe in the Bible or in your own personal growth with the Lord and things like that. And I'm like, that totally makes sense.
But I'm thinking for you, when Amos is gone, you will always hold him in your heart and know that he was a representation of Christ to you. Yeah. Just as in my mind, and I do think of it often when I think of Zoni. Zoni was my attachment figure during a season when I didn't have anybody, and I can still see his eyes when I would be sobbing and just looking into his eyes, and he's like, I'm here.
And it's really that connection. It really is. And I think this is where I think the wonderful thing is that does continue.
It does.
And that's what we're trying to tell you guys.
Yes.
Is that these relationships do continue. There are ways to keep them alive in your heart.
Right. And it's going to be difficult and it's going to be painful, but we recommend that you have that self-compassion to be able to give yourself the room to grieve as you need to. And I also want to recommend for people that are out there, if you have someone, if you've got a best friend like I do, who's about to lose her baby, to be supportive, to recognize that this can be just as powerful as losing a human that you love. And so we just thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope that this has been helpful. We also recommend, just as we had somebody ask if we would do a counsel trend on pet death, that if you have anything that you're interested in that you would like us to do a counsel trends on, please let us know. In the meantime, please subscribe to Counsel Trends. Gives us a thumbs up. And Mercy, you can do our usual closing.
And we love being a part of your life.